Hello Simmers and welcome to Amsterdam Airport Schiphol for a long-haul flight with the newly released MagKnight 787 v1.6.0 for KLM 641 from Amsterdam to New York JFK. The video will cover the full flight, meaning a look around the airplane to see what it looks from the outside, the startup, takeoff, climb out, and then I'll just skip the video until we are over in the United States for the descent preparation, approach and landing into JFK. So the flight plan will take us from Amsterdam across the North Sea, over the northeastern part of England, the southwest of Scotland, then across the Atlantic towards the Canadian airspace, and from Canada along the east coast down to New York, where we expect to land on runway 22 right into JFK. So like I said, we'll do a full video on this newly released MagKnight 787 v1.6.0. It is not completed yet. There's still some stuff in development for this airplane. I've had it in my hangar for I think 1.5 or 2 years now, but it's still because it wasn't finished and I didn't really like it. I never did a video on it, but with the newly released update, the airplane is a lot more likable despite the fact that it's not finished. So I think the time is there to do a video on this long-haul airliner, to show you what you get when you buy it, and so you can make a decision if you want to buy it or wait for the next year when Flight Factor has released their 787. They announced last week that they are working on a Boeing 787 at Flight Factor, so we'll just see what's in store with this one, and then you can decide whether you want to jump on board or just wait a little bit for the Flight Factor 787 to be released. As you can see, the 3D modeling on the outside of this airplane, there's not a lot wrong with that. It just looks very, very nice. So let's just jump to the flight deck and take a look at that, because they have overhauled the entire flight deck from the previous versions. The textures have become a lot nicer, and well, they say they have implemented PBR over the entire flight deck. Well, that is true, but there are some attention points to that. On a previous flight that I did from Los Angeles to Amsterdam, when I arrived over Europe in the morning, I had a beautiful orange reflection of the sky in my rudder pedals, and of course that cannot be correct, because there's no way, if the sun is standing in front of the airplane, that light can fall on the rudder pedals. So definitely a nice touch, but can do with a little bit of polishing, but that will be something that you will hear sometimes more often in this video. So what I did, I put the airplane on external power, switched the batteries on, went to the EFB. The EFB has been completely overhauled. It's much better now. One of the things that I didn't like in the previous version was that you always needed to install some old Java stuff to run the EFB. That's now all included in the download, so I re-downloaded the MagKnight 787 from my store.explain.org account. Completely deleted the previous one, only saved the livery folder, re-downloaded it, reinstalled it from scratch, and well, everything works now just from when I finished the installer. So that's definitely a big plus in this update. So what else can we do? Like as you can see here, the ground handling, we have set the external power to the airplane, and the nav lights are on to inform the ground crew. The doors can be opened via the doors page in here, by just hovering your mouse over the door. Press left mouse button, it will open it, and if you want to close it, press right mouse button. But we'll get back to that later. Let's first start by taking a look at the EFB. Now the EFB has a couple of options: aircraft configuration, performance, ground services, logbook. That's not modeled yet. You can view the credits, who did what. Just some names and special thanks, with a nice touch for all the people that are involved with the development of this airplane. You can initialize the flight, and you can have you can change or alter some settings. So what I did, I like my mass units to be in kilograms, the length in meters, the barometric default in hectopascals. I have the custom cursor on. I don't really know what it does, but well, thought it wouldn't hurt. Disconnect auto throttle at idle. I switched that off. Helpful pointers, well, you can switch that off, by the way. I set the IRS alignment time to real time. Shared barometer is on, so if I change the settings on the barometer on the captain side, it will automatically change the barometer on the first officer sides and the standby instrument. Now, use tiller axis, I have switched that off, and use roll for nose wheel steering, I've put that on, and that means that you control the nose wheel steering with the yoke. So left on the yoke is left on the nose wheel. I'm not really sure how to set the tiller axis to my rudder pedals, so that's why I use this for now. I have to look into that, but there's not a lot of documentation, virtually none, coming with this airplane, so it was quite hard to figure that out. There's not some sort of guide that will walk you through the settings. Use pitch brake. I switched it off. I don't know what it does. My brakes are on my toe brakes with the rudder pedals, and that's working correctly. So livery version 150, and the engine type is GE. The cockpit reflections are on, cabin reflection are on, the cabin seats are on, pass at top of descent, I switched that one off. Rain effects are on, the PFD heading horizon is off. I have disabled the other stuff in here. But that's all sort of stuff that you can set to your liking in the settings menu. So if we go to Initialize Flight, well, first we have to set fuel, cargo and crew in the aircraft config. So let's go to aircraft configuration. And let's say that we have a galley for a long range flight. That we have a crew of 3 in the flight deck and 10 in the cabin. And they all have 15 kilos of international luggage with them. Passengers, according to our flight plan, we have 211 passengers on board. So let's just set this one to 211, which is quite hard actually. It would be nice if you could alter this with the scroll button. As you can see, it's quite annoying if you can't get the figure that you want, and I don't know, you cannot type it in here, so that would also be a nice option, that they would make this like click it once, enter the number that you like, press enter, and then that's set. One last try, well, do 12, let's settle for that. Cargo, we have 1707 kilos of cargo on board. So let's make that 2030, doesn't matter too much. Fuel, we need 45,600 kilos of fuel. There we are. Let's make it 45,800. We have some extra weight on board. So here we go. So let's press load aircraft. And now we can initialize our flight. Oh. So with all that said and done, the weight and balance is now set. Let's proceed with programming the flight management system. Now, unfortunately, this is the default X-plane flight management computer. It's just been remodeled into the 787 style FMC, but the functions are very limited. Basically, the only thing you can do is plan your lateral navigation and set your cruise altitude, but it will not calculate arrival with amount of fuel, etc. It's a very basic add-on, which is a little bit of a shame. And I think that if Flight Factor comes around next year with their 787 and they will have a custom flight management system with full calculations, many people will choose that one over the MagKnight. So I think for the MagKnight development team, if they want to survive in the long run, they might want to give some priority to updating the flight management computer, customizing it, and giving it far more options than it has right now. Of course, that is a lot of work, but I think if they don't do it, then then after excuse me, then after the release of the Flight Factor 787, I don't think they will sell much copies of this one, if that's not fixed. But anyway, let's just go to the route page. We are leaving Amsterdam for New York John F. Kennedy Airport, so JFK. The flight number is KLM 641. And the first waypoint will be Burgi, because that's what our departure will go to. So go to the next page. After Burgi, it's the Lima 602 to Supur. So Lima 602 to Supur. After that, it is the Papa 1 to Godos. Then it's the Mike 981 to NATAP. The Niner November 97 to Tango Lima Alpha. Back on the Lima 602 to go. Next page. Then it's a direct to Bruce. And then a direct to Ibrot. So Bruce. And then to Ibrot. Then it's direct to Sunot. After which we'll fly direct to 5720 north. (5730) north. Next page. 5640 north. 5450 north. A direct to Nico. November 478 Alpha to Tops. A direct to Echo November Echo. And then it's an arrival to JFK. So Amsterdam, we will be departing runway 18 left, I presume. Yes, it is. For the Burgi 3 Echo departure. So to flight plan, Burgie 3 Echo to Burgie. That's all looking nice. And then it's an arrival into JFK. The Parch 3 arrival for runway 22 right. So Parch 3 via Echo November Echo for the ILS 22 right. And do we have Kimball or Norton in there? No, so that's it. So back to flight plan. So Parch 3 to Parch, Vector Direct IS. So let's go to the Lex page. Move ENI after tops. And then delete the vectors. Move Corvid over there. And that should be the trick. So execute that one. There we are. Now what we have to do, of course, what I forgot, is set the IRS to align. And our VNAV, after departure, first we will climb to, no, we'll climb immediately to flight level 380, then we'll have a step climb to flight level 400 over the Atlantic, where we will remain until we descend. So our initial cruise altitude will be flight level 380. And let's set our cruise speed to 0.84 Mach. And with that said and done, that's basically all that we can do in the nav, in the FMS right now. Let's check the nav radio page. I want to have, let's see, let's take a look at our departure chart. What VORs we need? I guess it's Sierra Papa Lima and Papa Alpha Mike maybe, or is it Rotterdam? Let's just take a quick look. Yeah, it's Rotterdam. It's the 110.4. on course 355. So 1104 at 355. And we need Sierra Papa Lima for this one. So that's 1084, but that's already set on nav2. So that's set and done for the radio tuning. The Lex page is on there. We don't have any performance data in the FMS, but we do have performance data in the EFB. So let's take another look at the performance. So we'll depart from Amsterdam. It derives this information from the FMS. We're gonna use runway 18 left for our takeoff. It's going to be the full 18 left. We don't use an intersection. The runway is dry, and now we have to take a look at the weather and insert the weather information. So I'm using Active Sky XP as usual, so I just use 122.0 for the ADIS information for Amsterdam. So let's just select this one, cross it over.
Echo Hotel Alpha Mike Airport information. Hotel 1025
just hover your
Zulu
cursor
weather.
and click.
Wind 178 at 18. Visibility 10,000. Sky condition 1900. Scattered 4500. Scattered light rain. Temperature 12. Dew point 8. QNH 0992. Advice on initial contact. You have information. Hotel
0992 for the QNH. So that's the
Echo Hotel
weather information that we needed. So we're going to derate our takeoff. We'll use flaps 15. Anti-ice will be engine and wing automated. and all operation reverse. So that's all right. Takeoff weight is 193,515. 193,924 on the flight plan. So that's very much within the reasonable range. Only 400 kilos lighter, so that's good enough for me. So with all the boxes checked and set, we can now press calc, and it will calculate our approach or our departure setting. So it's going to be flaps 15, takeoff trim setting will be 5, V1 135, rotate 149, and V2 of 158. So what I'll usually do is, I don't know if that's necessary in the 787, but with a V2 of 158, what I like to do is always add another 20 knots, because V2 is the speed at which the airplane can safely climb if one of the two engines fails. But if you are flying at that speed and the engine fails, before you can respond to that, the airplane will lose speed and will fall below that speed. So if you add 20 knots, it's just a sort of safety margin. I like to use it. I don't know if it's mandatory in the 787 to do so, but it's just my way of operating it. So I don't know if it's entirely accurate, but I like it. And of course, when we fly out of Amsterdam, as you might know, in the meanwhile, our initial climb is always 6,000 feet. So with that said and done, let's set the flight directors to on. And now we just have to wait for the alignment to complete, which will take just under 2 minutes. And that gives us time to run a check on the overhead, see if the lights... No, the lights test is not modeled, unfortunately. But what we can do is just run a flow over the overhead. So let me just put in this view that I set. So norm, IRS is on, batteries on. The in-flight entertainment and the cabin utilities are still off. I usually switch the in-flight entertainment on after the engine start, but we can set the cabin utilities on already. APU is still off. Wipers are all normal. Exterior lights, landing lights are off. Other lights are as required. Passenger signs, they can be switched on. Hydraulics, let's set them all to auto. Ram air turbine, we don't need it. That's the little windmill that drops out of the fuselage if both engine fails. So you have like a windmill generating just enough electricity to run the vital systems in the flight deck. Window heat, that can be switched on. Emergency lights, we cannot change that one. Flight deck door power is on. The battery, well, we can test it, but that's about it. The ground test, that's not modeled. This is not modeled. Cargo fire is not modeled. This is. Fire overhead test is not modeled. Engine ECC mode cannot be changed. Fuel jettison, we don't need it. It is modeled, by the way, so you can jettison fuel before landing if you have to return to the field, for instance. I will switch on the fuel pumps. Do not switch on the crossfeed until after engine start. The wing and anti-ice settings, they can remain off for now. I will set them to auto after engine start. The nav lights are on. Beacon is still off because we still have a ground crew around the airplane. The test lights is not modeled. Strobes and taxi lights are off. Runway turn-off lights are off. The wipers are off. Pressurization is not modeled. Air conditioning, PAX, we can remain. This can all remain off. The cabin temperature, I usually set them 1 knot to the left. That's roughly 20 degrees, 21 degrees Celsius, which is quite comfy for the passengers. So cargo temperature, that can remain off until after engine start. Broadband comm. Well, let's just leave that off for now. So while we done that, the IRS is now completed its alignment. So what we can do is we can arm LNAV and VNAV. Set the auto brakes to RTO. And what we can also do is set our transponder. So transponder, let's say that our flight number is also our transponder code, so that's 0641. And we can set this one to ident, back to VHF, and as soon as we are ready for pushback, we'll set it to TA only, and before takeoff, TARA. Having set all this stuff, it's about time to start to close some doors, get rid of some ground equipment, start up the airplane and be out of here. So what we'll do now is start up the APU. And in the meantime, let's get rid of some of this ground equipment. And what we can also do is close the doors. That's not done automatically, so hover your cursor, right click, and that will close the doors. And then what we'll do in the EFB, go to menu, go to ground surfaces, press plan pushback, and that will immediately set you or transfer you to the better pushback interface. And what we'll do is we'll push back into here. No, that's not really how it works in Amsterdam. What we'll do is we'll make it as realistic as we possibly can. So we'll go here and then proceed in here. This is usually how you're pushed back here, and then you start your engines taxi out for the runway that you want.
Ground to cockpit. Plan acknowledged. Call me through the menu when you are ready.
Alright, so the APU is on. APU generators can be switched on. We can switch the external power off. Switch the beacon light on. And let's call in the pushback truck. So start pushback.
Cockpit. Tow is driving up.
Hide the ground equipment. And let's disconnect the jetway. There it goes. So let's get rid of the external power units. They are gone. And here we are lifted. So KLM 641 Type 787 is fully ready. Delta 5 IFR to JFK.
And bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Let's say that we are cleared for pushback. Release the parking brake. Now press and hold the left mouse button until it's completely
starting pushback. And you may start engine.
down. Roger, starting sequence first 2, then 1. No, it was Delta 7 by the way, not Delta 5. But anyway. It's quite a long pushback, so let's just make sure that we are completely clear of the terminal building before we start our engines. Right, let's start engine number 2. Now you have to be quick because the engine spools up quite fast. At first it doesn't seem that anything is happening, and then all of a sudden it goes quite rapidly. So let's at 20 open the fuel control. I think the engines spool up too fast. If I were in the MagKnight development team, I would personally make it a little bit more realistic, a bit slower. But that's just me, I don't know how much work it is. I'm not a software developer or engineer or whatever. Just a lazy armchair pilot. But I think that spools up too fast. Another thing that might use a little bit of working is the particle system, as you can see. If you take for instance the IXCG 737, they really did an amazing job on the particle system in their latest update, giving very realistic water sprays behind the airplane, and it really enhances the visual quality of the add-on. So that might be something that the developers could look into. I think IXCG raised the bar in that respect. So anyway, number 2 is stabilized. Start number 1. There it goes. 20. Alright, with 2 engines stabilized, let's set the generator controls on. Set the in-flight entertainment passenger seats also on. The APU generator can be switched off. APU master can be switched off. This is all as it is supposed to be, so what we can do now is set the equipment cooling to auto, recirculation fans on, PAX, trim air all on. The wing and engine anti-ice are switched to automatic. So there's fuel in the center pump, in the center tank. So if we take a look at the fuel page, you can now see that the engine fuel pumps are switched off for that part. So let's just switch those on and also engage the cross-feed valve. So that's the fuel system, and if we take a look at the cabin temperature, just select the air. It's now 19 degrees. That's a tad too cold for most people, so let's just raise it one little click to the right, and that should bring it up to 2021. It goes almost immediately. That's not very realistic either. It always takes some time before the entire cabin reaches a certain cabin temperature. But anyway, it is modeled that in this screen, the EVIS, you see the status page. with a summary of the hydraulics, the APU, the oxygen, and some status messages. That's modeled. The electric system is modeled. Hydraulic system is
Operation
modeled.
complete. Set parking brake.
Fuel system is modeled. The air system is modeled. The doors are modeled, except for the cargo doors. They cannot be opened yet. I hope they will be in a future update. The gear page is not yet designed, so that's work in progress. Flight control page, that is modeled. EVIS display is modeled. Maintenance and Charlie Bravo, whatever that might be, is not modeled yet. So what we'll do, set the parking brake, so press and hold the left mouse button.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
And we'll perform a flight control check, so full left, full right, neutral, down, up, neutral and the rudder, full left, full right, neutral. The trim, we needed to set that one, is supposed to be 5, and the trim setting can be found here next to the engine instruments. It's now at 8.5, we want it at 5. So that is now set. The rudder trim is 0. We can set our flaps to 15.
Tow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the left. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
Thanks for your help. See you next time. Bye bye. So we are now TA only. And the pushback truck is now moving away. Clear signal is received. Let's switch the runway turn off and taxi lights on. We'll release the parking brake and just taxi out. So insert a little bit of throttle. We'll taxi out to the right, then we'll cross runway 27 to the end of 18 left. So it's a short taxi for us today. So KLM 641 is taxiing runway 18 left. Now what I don't like is the font size in the nav display. It's almost unreadable. Might be my eyes, but I think it's the fonts should be larger. It's the same problem that the SIBO mod had in the early days, and it's also in the default 737. So it is solvable, and I think the developers should look into that, because being able to read what's on the nav display, that's actually quite vital. So that would be nice if that could be resolved in a future update. But like I said, it's work in progress. It's not a finished product, so that's why I'm not bashing them like, oh, this is not good, this is not working. I'm just pointing out stuff that I'm still missing and that I'm hoping that they will address in future updates. And it's up to them to decide whether they will or not, if they even watch this video, which I highly doubt, but that's another thing. At least you know what you can expect, what's missing, what's working when you buy it as of today. So let's just taxi onto this taxiway here to cross runway 27 or runway 9er, how you look at it. We are approaching the runway, however, so let's switch the strobe lights on and also set the transponder to TARA.
Approaching 27.
Check 27, we are clear to cross towards Echo 6, runway 18 left. By the way, X-Plane 11 running on Vulcan. Sky and weather, active Sky XP by Hi-Fi simulations as usual. Flight plan, professional flight planner X by Aerosoft. Charts, Navigraph. And I think that's about it. Pushback was better pushback. And of course the 787 by MagKnight. So let's say that we're clear to line up and wait to runway 18 left. The transponder set TARA, strobe lights are on. Runway turn-off lights are on. Because we are not yet cleared for takeoff, we'll leave the landing lights off for now, but we'll switch them on as soon as we are cleared for our takeoff into
Approaching 18 left.
the Burgie 3 Echo standard instrument departure, departing for John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. So here we go, lining up.
On runway 18 left.
Check, runway 18 left is verified and correct. And here we are. Let's come to a full stop. Okay, let's say we're cleared for takeoff. KLM 641 Heavy is cleared takeoff, runway 18 left. So landing lights are on, brakes released. Let's spool up the engines. Start the clock, that's the chronometer. That's running now, and set takeoff thrust. Cross-checked.
V1. Rotate.
Positive rate. Gear up. This beautiful wing flex that is beautifully animated in this add-on. That's really nicely done by the developers. So let's make a left turn, stay on our lateral profile, lower the nose slightly. to increase speeds. Dial up the heading 163. And let's switch the autopilot on. Auto throttle is engaged. It's VNAV, not flight level change. Alright, flaps 10. Flaps 5. And flaps 1. We are now speeding. We're climbing out really fast. 5,000 feet per minute, that's a bit too much. But we have to lose speed. It will come down now because we are now at the desired speed level. So let's say that we are clear to climb flight level 180. Okay, speed to 50, so flaps up. Let's switch the nose gear light off, runway turn off, and taxi lights can be switched off. Auto brakes are back to off. Flaps up, gear is up. We have passed our transition altitude. Oh, I didn't set the QNH to 09 or 9 or 2. My bad. That's quite a big and grove mistake that you shouldn't be making. So anyway, we're climbing out like a homesick angel with those powerful engines and of course the load of the airplane. We're not fully loaded, we're quite light, not a lot of freight on board. We don't have a full load of passengers. But we have taken off, so this is the Aalsmeer area. Aalsmeer de Brug, Hoofddorp, in the municipality of Haarlemmermeer. We have Zandvoort and Haarlem over there. And if that is Hoofddorp, then this is probably Lisse. And this should be New Vennep, if I'm not mistaken. De Kagerplassen met Kaag. Then this is probably Leiden. Met Katwijk. And then this will be Noordwijk. IJmuiden. And this will probably be Zandvoort. Should be able to see the Formula 1 track down there. Let's take a look if we can see that from the first officer's side. Yep, here, this is the Zandvoort racing circuit. The Dutch GP was unfortunately cancelled due to COVID-19 this year. It was something that I was really looking forward to, but well, it is what it is. Let's just continue our climb to our initial cruise altitude of flight level 380. Let's set these seat belts back to auto. And there are no strange lights on the overhead. We have passed 10,000 feet, so the landing lights can be switched off. And here we are, KLM 641. Let's dial up our heading. Now, since I was complaining about the font size on the nav display, another thing that I don't really like, what I like to see changed, is the fact that we cannot change the range on the separate NDs. That would be nice if you can set a different range on the captain side from the first officer side. But that's all Maybe that's still in store, I don't know. I don't know how realistic or how detailed the developers want to make this add-on. But like I said in the beginning, with the announcement of Flight Factor that they are also working on a 787, which will probably be study level. If they don't want to run out of customers at MagKnight, then I probably think it would be wise to address those issues and make it even better than it is right now. It's definitely a lot better than when I bought it like 2 years ago. They've made big progress in the meanwhile, but there's still stuff that needs to be developed. There's room for improvement in some other areas. Let's hope that they will keep updating it, because despite the fact that it's not a finished product, I start to like it more and more. Which is always a good thing if you are updating a product. It means that you're on the right track as a developer. But the biggest issues, from what I can tell, is the font size on the nav display, not having separate nav displays that you can alter the range settings on. The standard FMS, which is very limited with basically only the lateral navigation, and some very basic virtual navigation. If you look at the progress page in there, where was it? Here it is. As you can see, it's the distance you have to go, it's the estimated time of arrival, but it doesn't do anything with fuel calculations, predictions whatsoever. You cannot insert winds that are impacting your fuel calculations whatsoever. So it's very basic, just a basic Explain 11 flight management computer. I know it's a whole lot of work to make a fully customized flight management system, but I think it would be really awesome if they could do that. If they don't, well, I mean, it's on sale in the explain.org store. I thought it was roughly 45. Yeah, it's $45. So no, it's not in the price range of, for instance, a Flight Factor A320, of a TOLIS A319, A321. So it's fair that you don't get the same amount of realism for this price. But I think, well, like I said, to stay in business in the long run, I think it would help to address those issues, because that would make the choice between this one and a Flight Factor one a bit more difficult than it would be with the status of this add-on that it is nowadays. Having said that, the Flight Factor 787 is still, well, at least a couple of months away. It's announced for 2021, and I think it will be late 2021, if not 2022. But we'll just have to wait and see how that development project goes. From the screenshots that I saw, they had done some 3D modeling, but it was definitely not near completion. So MagKnight does have a huge head start in that respect. So let's just see how it goes, and how we as customers end up with these add-ons. It's always nice to have a choice. It's nice to see some competition, put a little bit of pressure on things for the developers, and see how they perform under that. Anyway, that's it for this first part of the video. The setup, the flight setup, the pre-flight, the taxi out, takeoff, the climb out. I'll proceed another 10,000 feet to the cruise level of 380, and then I'm back with you guys as soon as we start to arrive in the New York area for the approach preparation, and then the landing in JFK runway 22 right. So thank you for watching so far. I'll see you in a bit. So here we are, 7 hours later. We are in the US airspace, And what we'll do now is we are still quite far from our top of descent, still 118 nautical miles. But what I will do now is take a look at the approach chart and verify that the altitude constraints in the approach chart are correctly in the flight management computer. So we are now near Rochester and at Kennebunk. From there we will fly to Providence, and we have to be at 240 at Trade and at 9000 at Rober. So let's make sure that those two altitude constraints are correctly in the flight management system. So at Trade we had to be at 240, that's a hard constraint. And next page, at Rober we have to be at 9000. So that's also set, and that makes immediately the top of descent is a bit closer to where we are now. It's roughly 30 miles, so that's really worth the effort. There are no other constraints here, but when I take a look at the final approach chart for runway 22 right, we have to be at 3000 feet at Corvet. So let's see if that one is in there. So Corvet, it says 1900 in here. And then also 1900 in matter. We want to be at 3000 at Corvet, so let's just make that 3000 and 220 knots. Although, yeah, it's 10 miles out, so let's make it 220 and then 3000 feet. Matter at 1900 and then runway 22 right. So since the top of descent is now 80 miles out, it's a little bit closer. Let's just listen to an ATIS for JFK and see if runway 22 right is still our runway of choice.
Kilo Juliet Foxtrot Kilo Airport information Mike 1751 Zulu weather wind 203 at 7 visibility 10 sky condition few clouds at 4500 temperature 23 dew point 16 altimeter 3011 advise on initial contact. You have information Mike.
So information Mike, the wind 203, so runway 22 is still the runway of choice. It's going to be a slight crosswind from the left. So what we can do is go back to the performance, and now we can also calculate our landing performance. By the way, I encountered a bug with the fuel system. We still have a lot of fuel. The center tank drained correctly, but as soon as that dried out, I left the crossfeed valve open, and there was no fuel flowing from the wing tanks to the engines, at least not in the system, so it remained the same number. The engines kept running, so that's a bug. I filed a post to the forums for MagKnight addressing this issue. When you shut down or close the crossfeed valve and then open it again, then you do have the correct fuel flow, but that's a bug and you shouldn't have to do that as far as I know. And it's certainly not correct that if there is no green line from the pump to the engine, that the engines keep running. I mean, they should run out of fuel and flame out, but that doesn't happen either. So the fuel system, there's still some issues that need to be resolved. Anyway, so our landing airports will be JFK. We expect to land runway 22 left, or was it right? No, 22 right. Conditions are good, and let's just check that wind again. I forgot the speed already.
Kilo Juliet Foxtrot Kilo Airport information November 1751 Zulu weather wind 203 at 7 visibility 10 sky condition few clouds at 4,500 temperature 23 2.16 altimeter 3011 advise on initial contact. You have information November Kilo Juliet Foxtrot Kilo Airport information November 17.
Make sure that in the QNH, if you are working in inches, you put the decimal between the two numbers. So not 3011, but 30.11. So we expect a flaps 30 landing with a temperature of 23 knots. We don't expect to use any anti-ice. We'll use full reverse. Spoilers will be set to auto, and I want auto brakes 2. And NNC is not working. So the landing weight, as we expect it to be, well, we burn roughly 4,600 kilos of fuel per hour. We are, let's say, half an hour away. So let's subtract 2.3 from the current, so that makes it 28 tons of fuel. Let's go back to the menu, config. We had a zero fuel weight of 147, so we add 28 tons to that, making it 175.7. So let's go to the performance and 175,700. So 175,700 kilos landing weight, VREF at 5 knots, flaps 30 landing, calculate, giving us a VREF of 143 knots, and a VREF plus 5 is an approach speed of 148 knots. We will use 2,000 meters off the runway to come to a complete stop using auto brakes 2 and full reverse. So let's set the auto brakes to 2 already. And let's go to the nav radio page. The frequency for the ILS is 109.5 on course 221. So let's set nav radio 1 to 109.5 with a forward course of 221. And the Kennedy VOR is 1159, so let's dial that in nav2. And we don't need a course for that, it's just nice to see a distance reading. We are now 177.5 miles away from JFK. We are at flight level 40, so we're going to fly pretty much straight in. So it's going to be 40 times 3 is 120 plus 10 is 130 nautical miles out when we start our descent. And that's roughly alright. It's giving us 140 miles out, so that's okay. We'll just settle for what the airplane is telling us to do. Initial descent will be to flight level 180, then we'll transition the QNH and descend further to 9,000. And that's about it. Let's see, we have to set our minimums. We expect an ILS approach, so it's going to be 250 feet. Now you set your minimums, or you can check the setting in the EVIS display. And when you rotate your minimum knob in here, you will see a value in there. So let's set that to 250 feet. I want to set that radio, but somehow this doesn't work. So since this one is barometric, it should be 263. So let's make it 260. So what we can do already is set the barometric to 3011, so that once we are over at flight level 180, we can just press standard and it will set itself to the correct QNH. So having done all this, there's not much else to do but to wait. We are 17 miles away from the top of descent. So we have the radio set, we have checked the altitude constraints in the flight management computer. And for now we are just waiting for the top of descent to arrive. So at trade at 240, let's see how that works out. I will set my altitude to 18,000. And let's see if it starts the descent automatic. We are in LNAV and VNAV mode. So let's just wait and see. Nine miles to go. We encountered a little bit more wind than expected, so the flight is taking longer. It's now 7 hours 16 minutes, so according to the plan we should be landing in 4 minutes. Well, we're not gonna make that. We are still 211 miles away from JFK, so that's gonna be roughly half an hour worth of flying time. So it's gonna be a half an hour delay on our arrival. What we'll do is we'll switch the seat belt signs on. Top of descent 2 miles. One mile. And here it goes. 0 miles. Throttle is back to idle. Speed is running down and we are starting to descend. So the VNAV function seems to sort of work. As soon as the speed is down at the magenta indication, the rate of descent will increase. What we can do is add some drag if we like to, but for now let's just wait and see how we end up. So here we are at the correct speed. So I would expect this to start descending right now. It's not doing that. So you have to press VNAV twice before the airplane starts its descent. Let's increase drag because now it's compensating quite steep. So the speed is running up. And what we want is the speed remaining around the magenta indication. And let's see if we meet our altitude constraints. So far it doesn't seem to be too accurate, but let's just wait and see how things work out. Now we are descending, we are still high, the temperature is minus 33, there's quite a lot of clouds coming up. So what we'll do is we'll just switch the engine and wing anti-ice on. Now, according to this indication, we are actually below our glide path. So you would expect the rate of descent to reduce. But now all of a sudden we are above it. So that's a bit strange. But it's running up, so we are getting there. So what we expect is when this magenta diamond is at this white line, the rate of descent will reduce to the normal rate of descent, and we can store the speed brakes. So let's just see how this goes. All these diamonds is all other air traffic flying around the New York area. So now we see that the rate of descent is reducing. No, now it's not 2000, but we are now on target. So let's see how the airplane behaves. Now it's starting to reduce the rate of descent. Speed, let's remain stable. Let's just arm the spoilers and see what happens to the airspeed. Oh, it's keeping it under control with the thrust setting. 1800 to 2000 feet per minute descent, that's nice. So we are now inbound trade, and we have to be at 240 over there. That's 27 miles, and we have to descend another 6,000 feet. So we're probably gonna meet that constraint, but let's see if the airplane levels off if we reach 240 before we are at trade, because this is a hard constraint. So we would expect it to do so, but I have a gut feeling that it will just continue to descend to 180, but let's just wait and see. So here we are crossing 300, another 6,000 feet to go. We are in the first layer of clouds. A thin layer, we were already breaking through it. So 4,000 feet to go. And I expect we will run into a big stutter any second now, because you will see that the sim has to load in the New York City area. That usually takes a couple of seconds with very poor frame rates, but as soon as it's loaded we'll just continue happily after that. Quite anxious to see what the VNAV mode is like. I had a question on the previous video with the MagKnight 787 from, let me just check the name, Svedi. Yeah, Svedi, Sierra Victor Alpha Tango Yankee. And he asked me specifically about the VNAV, so that's why I leave this part of the descent in the video. Usually I just initiate the descent and then I'll leave, let the sim running, stop the recording until I'm well into the approach, but I just want to see if the VNAV is working correctly with altitude constraints. So we're coming up, trade 6 miles. We are 25,500 feet, 2,000 feet, or 1,800 feet per minute. So in 1 minute we should be over trade, meaning we're probably not gonna hit the 240 at trade. But let's just wait and see. Here we go, passing 250, so another 1,000 feet, 3.5 nautical miles. So 1.7, 400 feet. We're doing 6.7 miles per minute at 402 knots ground speed. So yeah, roughly it made it roughly within like 100 feet or so. But we didn't pass exactly at 240, but now we are past that trade at 240, continuing our descent to 9,000 for what was it called again? Rober, and we have to be at 12,250 knots at Galverton. So let's make sure that we have that one in here as well. I missed it on the previous one. So it's going to be 250, 12,000. And you immediately see that the airplane starts to increase its descent. So it does look like VNAV is actually calculating the rate of descent that is required to meet an altitude constraint at a certain waypoint. Passing 210 CCC in 34 nautical miles. We have to descend 9,000 feet. We are doing 383 knots ground speed, so that means we are flying 6.38 miles per minute. So if I divide 32.5 by that answer, it's gonna take us 5 minutes to be there. We are at 20,000 feet, so I expect to have a rate of descent of a little under 2,000 feet per minute, and it does look like that is the case. We have 1,700 feet per minute, so it does look like the VNAV is actually calculating the required rate of descent and setting that automatically. So I think VNAV is actually quite accurate with this airplane. Just wonder if it will meet the speed constraint, because it will have to lose 40 knots before we get the CCC. So basically what you would expect is maybe a little bit faster rate of descent, so you hit the altitude constraint a little bit before CCC, then level off and reduce the speed to 50 knots. And what I can do is I can switch to flight level change to achieve that, but let's don't. And besides that, let's set our altitude window to 9,000 now. And we are approaching our transition altitude of flight level 180. We're gonna descend below that, so let's set the QNH to 3011. Passing 18,000 down to 12,000 feet. So another 6,500 feet to lose in 21 miles. Very curious to see what it will do with the speed limit. And let's say that we are clear to descend to 6,000 feet for now. So we have something like 2 minutes to reach CCC, and we need to lose 4,000 feet, and we are descending at 1,600 feet per minute. I wonder if that's correct, but let's just wait and see. I want to do as little intervention in the automation as possible just to see how accurate it is. So 3,000 feet to go in 11 miles. It's a little over a minute. So speed is still 353 knots. So that's 5.8 miles per minute. So 1.5 minutes to go 1600 feet. Yeah, we should be roughly right. And now the speed is already starting to reduce. We want to be at 250. We're not going to make, I think I'll add a little bit of speed brake just to help the slowdown of the airspeed. That's something that you, I think normally we would get a drag required message in the flight management system at this stage. So let's just help it a little bit. So 4 miles, 1000 feet to go. And we are at 250 knots. So this does seem to work. Now I have that stutter that I was talking about, so the sim is now loading in the JFK, the New York scenery, roughly 50 miles out. Yeah, here we go again. 50 miles out, that's when you get the stutter. So we have VOR left, that's the IJFK. Let's see if that is correct. It's quite strange actually. No, IGOC is the one that we need, so this is not the correct DME reading so far. It would be strange to capture an ILS signal so far out. It's impossible to do that. Anyway, we are continuing down to Rober. We need to be at 9,000 feet, so that's another 3,000 feet to lose. And let's reduce the range on the nav display a little bit. So we're now at 40 miles. So let's say that we are clear to descend to 3,000 feet. And cleared for the approach. Let's take a look at the fuel status. Still 29.3 tons. So we just passed 11,000 feet. 1,800 to go for our constraint at Robert. 1,800 feet in 10 miles. That shouldn't be any problem. The rate of descent is also quite low. Speed 240, 250, that is perfectly alright. The air temperature is above 10 and we get the message that the anti-ice is still on, so let's switch that back to auto. And that will switch it off, because with this temperature there's no risk of icing on the wings or engines. So anyway, 10,000 feet is coming up. Let's switch on the left and right landing lights. Passing 10,000 feet. Speed is below 250 and the landing lights are on. So that's how we like it. Cabin crew, prepare the cabin for landing. I should have said that 10,000 feet higher, but anyway, we've said it. Now it's up to them to deal with it. So let's see, 9,000 feet is coming up, nice and even. So yeah, the VNAV, it does seem to work quite well actually. Pleasantly surprised by that. Now there's just one thing that I don't know, and that is how I will get an ILS display on my nav display. There's the map and the plan mode, then there's the menu, but I can't figure out any setting for the localizer or ILS that you usually have in Boeings. I'm not really sure whether that's normal in the 787. I'm not that familiar with this airplane. Let's just take a quick look if we find it somewhere in here. No, it doesn't really look like it. Strange. Well, anyway, let's just focus on the flight. We are now descending to 3,000 feet. Try to read some of the names in here. But the fonts, they are just so damn small, I can hardly read them. So I want to go to Corvette, that's down there. We have to be at 3,000 feet at that waypoint. So I would expect to see a slightly bigger or faster rate of descent, because you have another 5,500 feet to go. So let's just wait and see how the airplane handles this. So yeah, for the developers, if you can make the fonts on the nav display bigger, that would be very much appreciated. It's very hard to read anything here. I know I don't have the best eyes in the world, but they're not that bad. Now the one thing that I don't get is on the primary flight display it says my airspeed is 240 knots. On the nav display it says my airspeed is 271 knots. With a 9 knot headwind giving me a ground speed of 263. So there's something wrong with the indication here and the indication on the nav display. I think, at least. I wouldn't know what to make of this otherwise. So 13 miles out, we have to increase the rate of descent. It's doing that, but not fast enough to my liking. So what we'll do is we'll just vector ourselves. Fly heading 315. Perform a flight level change to 3,000 feet. So I'm just adding a lot of speed brake because I want to be at 3,000 feet a little bit earlier. So I can also reduce the speed to 220 knots. And what I will do is I will arm the approach mode. To have some visual guidance as to where the ILS is. So 3,000 feet is coming up. Let's go back to vertical speed mode and reduce the speed to 210. Speed brakes armed, 3,000 feet. I don't know what it's doing, but it's not what I want. Select flaps 1. Reduce the speed to 180. And set flaps 5. So our approach speed was 148 at flaps 30. Let's set flaps 10. IGOC, that is the correct one. We're 12 miles out, 180 knots, intercepting the localizer. With the approach mode still armed. Let's descend to 2,500 feet. No, let's not. Let's leave it at 3,000, see what happens. And our missed approach altitude will be 4,000 feet. And we need JFK radial 190 for that, so that's good to put in the nav radio page. So 190 for the course for VOR2. So approach mode is engaged. We have to turn further to the left. And we should start to descend now to capture the glide slope. It's not doing that correctly. So let's just reduce the speed to 160. And let's descend a little bit faster now. Somehow I have set my ILS, but I think that's a problem with the Dr. Sieski design for the JFK. The runway is wrong. Set the ILS. I had this on other airplanes before. So what we'll do is we'll just go back to heading select, because we have to line up on this runway. We are not properly aligned, despite the ILS says that we are. So we'll just set 148. We'll lower the gear. Flaps 20. Nose gear light, runway turn off, taxi lights on. Flaps 30 set. And let's disconnect the autopilot and the auto throttle. And turn left for final approach runway 22 right. Now our missed approach altitude is 4,000 feet. So that is set, and the missed approach heading 221 is also set. We are way too high now. So let's just correct that. We are not stable. Should be making a go around, but I don't have time to do that, so that's why I'm making this tactical approach.
Too high. Too high.
Check.
Approaching. 2 right.
Check. 22
Too
right,
high,
verified
too
and
high.
correct.
500. 400. 300. Approaching minimums. 200.
Continue landing.
100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Reverse enabled.
5,000 feet remaining.
Full reverse. Ground speed's 80 knots. Reverse is idle. Auto brakes off. Oh yeah, of course we have to steer with the yoke, not with the rudder pedals, so flight director's off. Let's start the APU and vacate the runway. Landing lights and strobe lights are off. So here we are at New York JFK. Now the mistake in the approach, I don't think that was due to the MagKnight. I think that's the Dr. Shesky Designs JFK Airport. I've had this airport for quite a long time. I never updated it. And I had this a couple of years ago also with the Flight Vector 777 and some other airplanes that I tried to land on runway 22 right. So it's not the MagKnight 787's mistake. So let's retract the flaps and spoilers. APU generators can be switched on. And the transponder can go back to TARA. So let's just take a look at that landing from the outside. So on the center line. Not bad for a tactical approach, but of course not what you want in an airliner. But touchdown was quite nice, however, despite little bounce. Anyway, let's continue the taxi. And let's turn onto the ramp here. See if there's a gate available for us. Completely unfamiliar on JFK and don't fly here very often. And with that ILS issue on 22 right, I think I remember why. But the good thing, because we had to make that intervention on manual control, is that the airplane actually handles quite nice when you fly it manually. It's a busy day at JFK. Let's see, do they have a gate available for us? Ooh, doesn't really look like it. It's nice to have a busy airport, but it's not so nice not to have a gate. Let's just see where we can park. I think that's quite realistic. Ground operations on JFK are always chaotic. Because I don't think that we will fit between these planes. We have too much wingspan for that. So I think what I'll do is I'll just have to taxi here and park in one of those spots. Of course, having almost 29 tons of fuel on board is way too much. It should have been a lot less if we didn't have that crossfeed valve bug that I addressed earlier. So I hope in a future update they can resolve that issue. Because usually what I do with long haul flights like this is just put the flight in takeoff and then basically check every 2 or 3 hours to see if everything is alright. So I just noticed it too late. That's why we had too much fuel on board. But anyway, something for the developers to look into. I've addressed it on the forums, so pretty sure they will read it and then look into it. Let's set the parking brakes. Parking brakes are set. Generator, APU generator is on, so let's switch off the engines. And let's call for some ground equipment. And let's also set the external power. The window heats can be switched off. Fuel pumps, crossfeed valve can be closed. Let's leave the air conditioning on. Beacon light can be switched off. Passenger signs can be switched off. And with the buses approaching, let's open some doors. Disembark our passengers. So this concludes flight KLM 641 from Amsterdam to JFK. I will have to look into that JFK scenery to see if the ILS can be fixed, if there's an update available. But other than that, hey, why are the doors not opening? I must say, in terms of the airplane, VNAV was pretty good. I don't really understand why it didn't. Why did that right? Oh, my microphone's falling. Sorry. I don't know. When I wanted to turn into final, it turned to the right instead of the left. I don't know why it did that, but we managed to recover from that. I hope they will, on the model part, implement the cargo doors. That would be nice. And in the flight deck, like I mentioned earlier, the font size on the nav display, it would be nice to have that bigger. They have to look into the fuel system, where the crossfeed valve the behavior of the crossfeed valve with the fuel pumps is not as it should be. As soon as the center tanks are drained and you have the crossfeed open, it will just, there won't be a green line from the fuel pumps on the wing tanks to the engines. So the amount of fuel will not reduce during flight, although the engines do keep running. So there's something of a bug in there that they have to look into. Other than that, the VNAV, it descended nicely. It met the constraints. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. It would be nice to see a custom FMC, but I know that that's a lot of work, and I don't know if they how realistic they want this to be. But I would definitely advise the developers to start working on that, with the competition of the Flight Vector 787 on the horizon for next year. But other than that, I had a lot of fun with this add-on. Another thing that could be a little bit more realistic in my humble opinion is the spool up time of the engines. That was very rapid. Don't know how realistic that is. I don't know this airplane in real life. I'm not a real world pilot, but just my gut feeling is telling me that it's too fast right now. It's not realistic. But, well, let's just leave it at that. So it's not a finished product. There's still work in progress on a lot of things. Not all the systems on the system display work. Most of them are. It is usable. You can do long-range flights with it. Just make sure that once the center tanks are drained and you're back to the 2 engines, either close the crossfeed or close and reopen the crossfeed. Otherwise you will have that fuel issue that I ran into. So yeah, I like the EFB, I like the performance calculations, I like the overall look and feel of the flight deck. I think that's really nicely done. I love the animations, including the wing flex. Some people think that it's a little exaggerated. I don't think so. I think it's actually quite real. I saw 787s come in with very high wing tips over the fuselage. That's how much flexibility there is in those wings. So yeah, all in all, not finished. I'm not gonna say it's good or it's bad, but I'm starting to like it for the first time since I think it's 2 years ago that I bought this add-on. Now it's at a point that I'm saying like, well, I might start to use this more often. So I think that's a big compliment to the developers that they are on the right track. Anyway, if you saw any mistakes, please point them out to me in the comment section. As usual, please do so in a respectful manner. Not only point out a mistake, but also tell me or explain to me what I did wrong and how to do it right, so everyone who watches this video can learn from it. And yeah, basically that is the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If you have any tips, tricks, comments whatsoever, leave them in the comment section below. And I hope to see you all again healthy and safe on another video on another day. So thank you for watching and bye bye.